This happened when I was 14. For a little bit of background, this takes place at my grandparents' house. They live in Virginia, in a forest by a large river, in a loose community. There are about 3 roads in the community, one of which has about 15 houses, a short road that leads to some wetlands that smell terrible, and then there's a long road that leads down to the river that has 3 large houses. That's the road that my grandmother lives on. Her house is by the water. On the other side of the house, across the gravel road, is her garage. The garage is about 100 to 200 feet back from the road and looks more like a large house rather than a garage. It is nestled against the tree line of the forest. When this happened, I was with my siblings along with my cousins. So it was dark out, and someone had the amazing idea of playing manhunt. The boundaries were set to the land which my grandparents own, which included the garage. One of my cousins and I decided it would be best to stick together so we could split up if somebody found us. We crawled into some bushes by the road and waited. Not long after we settled down, I started to get a feeling. It was very soft at first, just a tugging sensation in the back of my mind. Something was off. I slowly started to pay more and more attention to the noises around me. Everything sounded normal. By normal, I mean the cicadas were buzzing so loudly I could hear anything else. Still, there was the feeling that I needed to move. At this point, I suggested we were too close to the road and maybe we should change spots. We crawled out from the bushes and moved across the gravel road, making a wide arc around the garage just to prevent the motion lights from going off and showing my sister, who was hunting us, where we were. When I stepped out into the field that the garage is on the other side of, I was aware of something. I couldn't tell what it was, but I had something's attention. It wasn't the feeling of being watched, but more like knowing that something was out there, and it knew I was here, but it didn't know where I was exactly yet. I downplayed it and thought it might have just been my brother, as he likes to sneak up on people. Besides, me and my cousin often get feelings that things are watching us, and if I brought this up, she would only freak out. So, my cousin and I head for the tree line next to the garage. Now, the ground behind the tree line slopes down suddenly, at what I would say is a steep angle, for about 3 feet before flattening out. Kinda like if you Google forest roads and look at how just off the sides of the ground slopes down suddenly. We laid on our stomachs and watched the road from our new hiding spot, just inside the forest. I noticed after a minute that things were quieter. I looked back for a second and just kinda was listening to my gut for a minute. My gut was practically screaming at me to get up and run. I knew that something was watching me. I decided to just lay perfectly still and observe my surroundings closely. It was dark, and I could only see the barn and the field. I had no chance of seeing anything in the forest due to the leaves blocking most of the moonlight. It seemed very quiet and very wrong. I noticed the cicadas had stopped buzzing, and I couldn't even hear the crickets. It got so quiet that I heard ringing in my ears, and the only noises I could hear was the light crunching of leaves under my cousin's stomach as she breathed. By this point, she was looking around, clearly frightened. When I slowly looked up at her, I could tell she had the same feeling of dread, the feeling that something was waiting, and it was about to do something. When she opened her mouth to say something, we both heard a sudden crackling noise behind us, and both of us decided we did not want to die. I have never ran faster in my life. The motion lights from the garage turned on, and I could see the shadows of something behind us. We ran to where our grandparents' driveway starts, as it was much brighter. I looked back to see if my cousin was behind me, and I almost tripped over my own feet. I could only see its silhouette. It was, at my guess, 7, maybe 8 feet tall. Its arms were too long, and its chest was thicker than it should be. Its head was human, but also not human. The shape of it was all wrong. It had 2 yellow eyes that locked onto my frozen figure. It turned its head slightly and watched me while I stared at it. My cousin was not going to let me stand there and die, so she started pulling me back to the house, screaming at me. The thing across the street then turned its head to the side, as if watching for a car to come down the gravel road. It looked like its face had skin, but not the area around its lips or teeth. Think of anywhere that you could bite your own cheek or lips, and the skin and flesh around there was just gone. Its teeth were something else. One of the things that was wrong with it was its face was simply too big. Its teeth were huge, and they stuck out a bit from its face. I got the feeling it was showing me this to taunt me, as if to say, "Want to stick around and find out more?" No, I did not, and after figuring out the whole big sharp teeth thing, I was happy to run to the porch and hide with my cousin. We hid there for half an hour. We only came out after somebody suggested that maybe we hid across the street, and I was not okay with any of my family members possibly running into that thing again. While my cousin and I were hiding, we talked about how no one would believe us, and how if somebody did believe us, then it would be our grandmother, who would probably then try and find it. Both of us agreed just not to tell our family. When it's dark at my grandma's house, my cousin no longer goes outside and stays in. I don't stray far from the light of the house and don't go near any bushes. When I'm inside, I make sure all the windows are shut and locked. If I'm feeling brave, I'll sit at the end of the pier with my feet in the water, looking back at the house, never with my back to the shore. While I'm outside, and sometimes when I stand near windows with the curtains and shades open, I get the feeling it's watching me in the dark, wherever it lurks. I'm curious as to what this was. I'm pretty sure it wasn't a skinwalker, because Virginia isn't exactly close to any Navajo reservations. But at the same time, I don't exactly know. So, I've always wanted to share this story. I've only told a few people, just because I knew nobody would probably believe me. And to be honest, it took a few years for me to come to terms with what I saw. But I still stand by it. When I was 19, I'm 31 now, I lost my job at a Coca-Cola plant in New Mexico. Born and lived till I was 24. My older brother asked if I would be interested in working at the mines in Arizona. He had been there for a month already with a friend, and they lived in an RV park in Clifton, Arizona, and mine wasn't far out from where they lived. I lived at the chance to get out and get out of my boring town, and in about 3 weeks, I had myself a job. I would stay with my brother and his friend in the RV on weekends, and we would drive back to visit family, etc. The RV park we stayed at was actually pretty interesting. On one side, there was like a wall where on the bottom was like a gorge, where it would venture off into streams through the town, and on the other, a huge cliff. At night, the way the moon hit it looked like something out of a painting. The courtyard was huge, all the RVs wrapped around it. Where we were parked to get to the showers and rec room was just a straight 200 feet walk, majority through the big courtyard. The thing that did suck there was the javelinas. Sometimes after taking a shower, you would have to haul your butt back to the RV, or wait in the rec room for them to leave outside. They would sometimes be wandering in the park. I remember one time my brother and friend thought it would be funny to chase a javelina family off with bats. It was pretty hilarious, until they got chased back. So, one night after dinner, I decided to go outside and listen to some music. I remember we had a picnic-type bench that faced towards the courtyard. I'm sitting there with my headphones in, bumping some music, when I saw something come into the courtyard. I thought it was a cat at first, moved like one, but the body was longer. Then I saw the longer ears and thought maybe it's a coyote or a dog. I'm watching it kind of move through the area, but it was already dark, so I couldn't see it perfectly. My headphones are still blaring at this point. I decide to get up off the bench and get its attention. I do that thing where you click your mouth to get a dog's attention, and I see the ears go up when it heard me. I'm kind of standing by the RV door and the table, and I see the thing start to come towards me, but I see it's crouching but moving quickly. I'll never forget that. There I am smacking my tongue at it like an idiot, and this thing is moving like a snake. It got about maybe 80 feet, before all of a sudden, it must have heard something in the distance because it stopped, and its head kind of cocked, and decided to run off towards the cliff. Here's the thing I'll never ever forget. When it ran off, it stood up. It looked like a very skinny boy had been wearing a fur coat when it ran, because the skin was dangling, but still attached to its head. It was so fast and strange, I just sort of stood there, confused. I really had to just stand there and let my brain process, or try to process what I saw. I told my brother and his friend. Of course, they didn't believe me. My brother said it's probably somebody's dog, but that still didn't explain the boy figure. I told my mother, and she's seen some crazy stuff in her time, but nothing like what I told her. I never saw anything like that at the RV park again. Still saw the javelinas wandering about, but that was it. I worked for another few weeks, but got laid off and went back to see my parents. I honestly don't know too much about skinwalkers, but I know I saw something that wasn't in the realm of normal.